Hey, what's up? It's Privacy J here. It's time for another Sunday's live stream. So I just want a reminder. Today is the 1 year of COVID-19 of the Remembrance. Today it marked 1 year of the Remembrance of COVID-19, and also today is the daylight savings time. So spring forward comes with the 9 a.m. or even it end around in the evening tonight. So according to the post, so around 7 p.m. at tonight in the evening. So yeah. So I just want to tell you because 8 times of the confirmed cases of death. So yeah, hey, what's up, Hamza? Anyway, let's go over today's topics. Now, today, today's topic we have COVID prescription. Get the vaccine. Wait a month. Return to normal. The CDC claims to be following the science, but its advice suggests it's still paralyzed by fear. So yeah. So the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention has lost a lot of credibility during the COVID-19 pandemic by being late or wrong on testing, mask vaccine allocation, and school reopening. Staying consistent with that pattern this week, 3 months after the vaccine rollout began. The CDC finally started telling vaccinated people that they can have normal interactions with other vaccinated people, but only in highly limited circumstances. Given an impressive effectiveness of the vaccine, that should have been immediately obvious by applying scientific inference and common sense. Parts of the new guidelines are absurdly restricted. For example, the CDC didn't withdraw its advice to avoid air travel after vaccination. A year of previous pre-vaccine experience has demonstrated that airplanes aren't a source of spread. A study conducted for these Defense Department found that commercial planes have HEPA filtration and airflow that exceed the standards of a hospital operating room. So the guidelines do approve of vaccinated people meeting with low risk unvaccinated ones, but the only one with people from the same household and in a small private setting. So much for restaurants, birthday parties, and weddings. An unpublished study conducted by the Israeli Health Ministry and Pfizer showed that vaccination reduced transmission by 89% to 94% and almost totally prevented hospitalization and death, according to press reports. Immunity kicks in fully about 4 weeks after the first vaccine dose. And then you are essentially bulletproof, with the added safety of wearing a mask indoors for a few more weeks or months. A critical hold on. Necessity in public places, even if not a medical one, since you can't tell on site if someone's immune, there is a little vaccinated person should be discouraged from doing. On a positive note, the CDC did say that fully vaccinated people who are asymptomatic don't need to be tested, but the obvious recommendation should have come 2 months ago before wasting so many tests on people who have high levels of circulating antibodies from vaccination. Now, in, in its guidance, the CDC says the risk of infection in vaccinated people cannot be completely eliminated. True, we don't have conclusive data that guarantees vaccination reduce risk to zero. We never will. We are operating in the realm of medical discretion based on the wait, let me see. Okay, so based on the best available data as practicing physicians have always done, the CDC highlights the vaccines. Stunning success is ridiculously cautious about its complications. Public health officials focus myopically on transmission risk while all about ignoring the broader health crisis stemming from isolation. The CDC acknowledges potential risk of illusion, but doesn't go in details. It's time to liberate vaccinated people to restore their relationships and rebuild their lives. That would encourage vaccination by giving hesitant people a vivid incentive to have the shots. Operator, you read.
Throughout the pandemic, authorities have missed the mark on precautions. Hospitals blocked family members from being with their loved ones as they gasped for air, gagging on a ventilator tube, what some patients describe as the worst feeling in the world. In addition to the power of holding a hand, family members coordinate care and serve as a valuable safety net, a partnership that was badly needed when many hospitals had staffing shortages. Separating family members was excessive and cruel, driven by narrow thinking that focused singularly on reducing viral transmission risk, heedless of the harm to the quality of human life.
All right, thank you, narrator. As people yearn to be with their loved ones and rebuild communities, we shouldn't repeat that mistake. We cannot exaggerate the public health threat as we did with hospital visitation rules and keep crushing the human spirit with overly restrictive policies for vaccinated Americans. Loneliness has become a public health crisis. In pre-COVID times, it was estimated that 20% of Americans struggle with loneliness, a figure that has surely multiplied faster than research has been able to measure. We were reminded of this last week in a fair health study that revolved self-harm among kids increased as much as 300% last year in some parts of the country. Future research will likely find that the harms of isolation are greater than understood today. Narrator, you go.
Some experts selectively appeal to common sense when it comes to using discretion. Anthony Fauci said it was common sense to wear two masks at once. I too will invoke common sense to answer the big question so many are asking, what am I allowed to do after I've been vaccinated? Once a month has passed after your first shot, go back to normal.
Thank you, narrator. Dr. McCary is a professor at the Johns Hopkins School of Medicine and Bloomberg School of Public Health. He is the chief medical advisor to Sesame Care and author of The Price We Pay. So that was the return to normal. So anyway, we'll move along to this next topic. Uh, um, Lessons of the long COVID year. Lockdowns make the pandemic suffering far worse than necessary. As you say, I'm gonna go with the narrator. So yeah. Yeah, sorry guys, we're gonna skip to this. Anyway, let's go over to the next topic. Um, so a year ago of the COVID-19, we realized everything was about to change. Narrator, you go.
We rushed to the store to get cleaning supplies and canned goods. Our bosses told us to stay home. Millions of students across the country started remote learning. For a while, toilet paper was a high commodity, and so much more. This week was the anniversary of the World Health Organization's declaring a global pandemic, but also of something deeper. It has been a year since we had to unexpectedly and dramatically alter the way we live. Most of those changes are still part of our daily routines.
Thank you, narrator. In the early days of the pandemic, Dr. Anthony Fauci said that the things will get worse better than get worse, they get better. Far worse, it turned out. So, at least 533,904 Americans have died from the coronavirus. The global death toll stands at 2.6 million on in 3 Americans in grieving the loss of someone who died of COVID-19. Many of the virus victims were vulnerable, while others have been entering new chapters in their lives. The pandemic is not over, and the US death rate remains at nearly 1,500 people every day. The scaring is likely to linger for years to come, but a year in, we are dining out on a silver of of optimism. President Biden has held out to distant dates of hope. May 1st, when all adults in the US will be eligible to receive vaccines, and July 4th, when most modest Independence Day celebrations might start to show a resemblance to life like it once was. Your next narrator.
Today we're devoting this briefing to reflecting on a year of living with the coronavirus pandemic and how we have carried it on, despite months of pain and disruption.
Thank you. For many, the beginning of something different was not a single event, but a cascade of decisions, happenings, and headlines. There was a palpable for in the restaurant, and their fear was of each other. Zachary Kaplan of Virginia told the New York Times, friends stood at a distance. There was a less joy. He was one of the 27 readers who shared with us the moment they know the pandemic would change their life. Your next narrator.
In sports, it was more obvious. The clock stopped. In the days between March 11th and March 13th last year, sports arenas fell silent overnight, and tournaments were canceled. The virus took the sports world as much by surprise as it did the other parts of our society. I didn't think I knew the name of it, Serena Williams told The Times about those first days of the pandemic. I didn't think it would spread. Williams said that she had gone into lockdown early when the Indian Wells tournament in California was canceled on March 8th. I just went home and stayed, she said.
Keep going.
Isolation hit in different ways. and our relationships became defined by distance. More than 5,500 young people wrote into the Times about how the pandemic had affected their lives. Being a teenager in the US during the pandemic was lonely, disorienting, depressing, and suffocating, they said. As one 16-year-old said of the generation's pivotal moment, making history is way overrated. And we learned to cope differently. The enforced separations of the pandemic have brought a particular kind of mourning to many grandparents. It feels like a double loss, said Kathy Kohler of Ann Arbor, Michigan. I'm losing time with this newborn that I'll never get back. And I didn't get to see my daughter and son-in-law fall in love with him and become parents. I felt so cheated.
Okay, so we navigated being together while being apart, redefining romantic and platonic relationships and self-reliance. Some of us called in to the time primal scream lines and just let it all out. Lockdowns look different depending on your class, race, and gender. Higher income families could more easily work from home and avoid dangerous in-person interactions. Essential workers kept the country running while millions lost their jobs. Narrator?
These charts show how the pandemic clearly divided the country along two storylines, the haves and the have-nots. In response, mutual aid groups sprouted up across the country to help neighbors who had been left behind. Those of us who could work from home mostly did, and still do. Making a home office the office prompted us to ask, what are we putting up with? And why? This forced period of slowing down has been a chance to find out, Roxanne Gay writes. Leaving the office happened so fast that we didn't have time to say goodbye to our work friends, to our work plants. That includes the Times newsroom in New York City. Watch this silent movie about our silent office.
Okay, we found new creative outlets. While our favorite restaurants shuttered, we started making their famous recipe home, their famous recipe at home. These 19 songs got us through the quiet, and we turned to books for comfort, distraction, and escape in a what is it?
Tremendously
Upsetting year. Um, Great art will be made from this time, about this time, inspired by this time. Until then, we asked 75 artists to open up about their creative travails and triumphs this year. Take it away, narrator.
Saturday nights had a different rhythm. Do you remember what it felt like to be held and kissed by friends and strangers? Remember we memorialized special occasions and sweat on foreheads. Yolanda Wisher writes an opinion, the melting heat of a room made only for your joy? Her essay offers a visceral reminder. The arts superfan Edward Miniagle of Chicago saw 105 live performances in the before time. Now he watches TV. We also gathered scenes from around New York City as the lights on Broadway dimmed and the 24-hour city sighed to sleep. These pictures tell a story of a city ruptured and of resilience.
Okay, now the after may soon be upon us. About 68.9 million people have received at least one dose of a COVID-19 vaccine, including about 36.9 million people who have been fully vaccinated, with an average of 2.54 million shots and administered daily. Hurdles remain getting shots into arms, improving access to communities of color, and addressing global disparities. But there is a finally a light at the end of this. Narrator?
Just as we were emerging from a dark winter into a hopeful spring, and summer is not the time to not stick with the rules, President Biden said Thursday. This is not the time to let up. Keep wearing a mask, he said, because beating this virus and getting back to normal depends on national unity.
Thank you. Virus restrictions are starting to lift in Los Angeles. Narrator, you go first. You go.
Governor Andrew Cuomo of New York is in survival mode. Mr. Cuomo is plotting a path to salvage his job, his legacy, and a potential fourth-term re-election run in 2022, according to Democrats familiar with his thinking, amid mounting allegations of sexual harassment and other misconduct. On Friday, Mr. Cuomo denied the allegations and said would not leave office or bow to cancel culture. Senators Chuck Schumer and Kirsten Gillibrand, as well as most of New York's congressional Democrats, have called for his resignation. Mr. Cuomo, our politics reporter writes, finds himself sliding from hero-level worship to pariah-like status with the kind of astonishing speed that only the friendless suffer.
Keep going.
Stimulus payments to many Americans will begin arriving in bank accounts by direct deposit this weekend, the Treasury Department said. Payments will be released in batches over the next several weeks, with some coming in the mail in the form of checks or debit cards. The $1.9 trillion pandemic aid package represents a political about-face in the fight against poverty. While providing an array of benefits to the middle class, it also delivers more immediate cash assistance to low-income families than any federal legislation since at least the New Deal. Behind that shift is a realignment of economic, political, and social forces. The question now is how long the moment will last. Separately, a Times investigation found that nursing homes had manipulated a government rating system in ways that masked problems and left them unprepared for COVID-19.
Okay. And finally catch up on some great journalism with The Weekender. Our editors also suggest these eight new books, the latest TV recommendations from watching. So yeah. Okay, that was the anyway, move along. So 1 year ago, the coronavirus outbreak was declared a pandemic by the world last spring. Ushered in a year of lost disruption, and nothing feels like it will be ever the same again. These stories took stock of a time none of us were prepared for. Lost in America. You read, narrator.
1 in 3 Americans know someone who died from the coronavirus. They have coped with sudden pain and immeasurable sorrow. We spoke to those the pandemic left behind.
Okay, so the day shot clock stopped. It took just 3 days for nearly every sport to shut down, leaving empty arenas, courts, and rings filled only with the memories and the echoes of screaming fans. Here's how athletes, coaches, and executives meet a challenge with no president. What? You know what? What's the word? Hold on. Precedent in modern sport. Not a visitor in sight. Almost immediately after WHO declared epidemic. Borders closed and travel ground to a halt. Here's how 6 places, how dependent on tourism, were forced to adapt. The week our reality broke. Narrator, I'm gonna let you read.
Empty shelves. People in masks on the bus. Emails saying the office would be closed. A year ago, we realized that everything was about to change. For a brief moment, it felt like we were all in this together. Times Opinion looks at what happened.
Coming of age. Narrator.
For many American teens, this year will be the defining moment of their young lives. In words, images, and videos, they showed us how they've met these challenges in an unrecognizable world.
All right. You keep going, narrator.
The city that never sleeps sighed and did just that. We gathered scenes of New York City's cultural landscape in the moments before the shutdown. Do you remember your final night out before the curtain closed?
We'll see. That was like last year. Anyway, one very bad year for art. Great art will be made from this time, about this time, inspired by this time. Makers from across all fields shared how their practice and work has changed during this quarantine, because we're still in the middle of the pandemic. Here are the high and their lows, their hopes and their regrets. Someone will let you go. So yeah. On March 11, 2020, 1 year ago, the World Health Organization declared the coronavirus outbreak epidemic. More on that in the next stream, on Sunday stream, for 2 weeks. So yeah. So move along to COVID vaccine. Johnson & Johnson's COVID-19 vaccine. So here's what pregnant women should know about the Johnson & Johnson COVID-19 vaccine. They should have access to it, according to the CDC. I'm gonna let you read, narrator.
Since the Johnson & Johnson COVID-19 vaccine was granted emergency use authorization by the FDA, more than 450,000 people have been given a single-dose shot, according to the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. Unlike Pfizer's and Moderna's two-dose vaccines, the Johnson & Johnson vaccine uses another virus, one that causes the common cold, to deliver genetic information to cells.
Okay. Pregnant women were excluded in
clinical
trials of 3 vaccines, and now many women who are expecting have been grappling with whether they should get vaccinated. More on that details. Why were hundreds of vaccines appointments canceled? Too many people cut in line. So more on that details. So the CDC has concluded they can receive the Johnson & Johnson one-shot vaccine after reviewing more than 200 pages of data provided by the company and the Food and the Drug Administration. Narrator?
Vaccine experts interviewed by ABC News said although pregnant women are advised against getting other live virus vaccines, such as the one for measles, mumps, and rubella, because they can pose a theoretical risk of infection to the fetus, the Johnson & Johnson vaccine doesn't contain live virus and should be safe.
You keep going.
The vaccine contains an inactivated adenovirus that cannot replicate, a type of virus that can cause the common cold, called Ad26. The Ad26 vector contains a piece of DNA for the SARS-CoV-2 spike protein that triggers an immune response. Pregnant women certainly are asked not to receive live attenuated viral vaccines, said Dr. Paul Fitt, a professor of pediatrics in the Division of Infectious Diseases at Children's Hospital of Philadelphia and a member of the Food and Drug Administration's Vaccine Advisory Board. But this isn't an attenuated virus. It's a replication-defective virus and doesn't reproduce itself.
Okay. This same type of vaccine has been authorized for Ebola, and it has been studied extensively for other illnesses and for how it affects women who are pregnant or breastfeeding. Looking at the actual
Adenovirus.
adenovirus vectors, this actually is something that has been studied. So it's more tried and true approach, said Dr. Jessica Shefford. And hold on.
Obstetrician gynecologist.
Whatever I can't say. Thank you. And Chief Medical Officer of Very Well. Narrator, go ahead.
Although any new vaccine carries some risk, experts said that for pregnant women the risk posed by COVID-19 is likely much more severe. It is unsettling that pregnant women were not included in the pre-approval trials, Fitt said. You don't have that information, so you're learning now as you go.
Okay, so, but on the other hand, he added a pregnant woman gets infected with SARS-CoV-2 is more likely to suffer severe illness from the disease than a woman of the same age who is not pregnant. Next one, operator or narrator.
Several studies have shown that pregnant women are at an increased risk of high blood pressure, blood clots, preterm delivery, severe illness and death from COVID-19.
Well, actually, it's COVID-19. So yeah. Um. Go ahead, narrator.
At this time, the CDC recommends that pregnant women be prioritized for vaccinations and encourages them to speak to their doctors about the risks and benefits of a vaccination. More, Dr. Fossey reflects on the pandemic's one-year mark and how to get back to normality. According to Shepard, the primary immediate risks from the vaccine would be side effects in a person that are very typical even outside of pregnancy. The most common side effects reported in the Johnson & Johnson vaccine trials were pain at the injection site, headache, fatigue, muscle aches, and nausea lasting 1 to 2 days. Current data shows there's minimal risk of long-term adverse effects on a baby born to a mother who received the vaccine during pregnancy. The vaccine can be taken during any trimester. Since other vaccines are recommended during pregnancy, the CDC currently recommends spacing out vaccine appointments a few weeks apart, if possible.
Next.
The American College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists and the Society for Maternal-Fetal Medicine share the same stance as the CDC, emphasizing that vaccination is a personal choice. It is okay if a patient decides on her own that she wants to get the vaccine in pregnancy, with the understanding that she knows the potential risks, said Shepard, who advises all pregnant women to have a thoughtful discussion with their doctor. We do have science that clearly indicates that vaccination does decrease disease process, disease progression, and death, Shepard added. Risk versus benefit, in the end at this point, is transmission and death versus protection.
Okay, we're gonna move along to the last one. Before we end the stream. So yeah. Um, a year into COVID-19, experts share what normal could look like amid vaccines and variants. 1 year ago, on March 13th, Austin had the 3 cases of COVID-19. Texas had 39 cases. The University of Texas and Austin Independent School District canceled class. Governor Greg, that's in Texas, Governor Greg Abbott issued a disaster declaration for all 254 countries. So we're gonna skip at that. So yeah, we're not gonna talk about that. Donald Trump, skip that. So yeah. Sorry guys, someone just called me. Anyway, we'll move along.
It's been a long year of wearing masks, washing hands, and being physically distanced from friends and family. I know everyone is exhausted, says Dr. Robin Watson, the chief medical officer for Baylor Scott and White in the Austin and Hill Country region. We've got to stay vigilant.
When will this pandemic end? We will be able to go back to normal, and what will normal looks like? Narrator?
Toby Hatton, a nurse who leads Ascension Texas Infectious Disease Response Unit, knew when he started tracking a mysterious coronavirus in China around December 2019 and January 2020 that it would be a minimum of 18 months of fighting this disease. That puts us into June, July, August, he says.
Last one, narrator.
Bring on the herd immunity. This disease has been so hard to fight because it was new and no one had immunity to it, says Dr. Matthew Robinson, an infectious disease specialist at St. David's South Austin Medical Center. In order to go back to a life that more closely resembles time before March 2020, we have to reach herd immunity. That happens when enough people have immunity so that the virus is no longer spreading heavily throughout the community and the virus has no fuel to create new variants. Herd immunity happens either through vaccinations or through infection, and through infection is the dangerous way, Watson says.
All right. So we need to get vaccinated to get back to pre-pandemic life. It's allow us the freedoms that we all I want. Dr. Robin Watson, Chief Medical Officer, Baylor Scott and White. Take it away, narrator.
Really bad viruses don't usually get brought under control through treatments. You handle most viruses through vaccinations, says Dr. Jordan Weingarten, who works in the intensive care unit at Seton Medical Center. Polio went away, not because we learned how to treat it, but because we have vaccines. The same is true for measles, smallpox, and chickenpox. We need to get vaccinated to get back to pre-pandemic life, Watson says. It allows us the freedoms that we all want.
Excuse me. I just only gotta press the wrong button. Anyway, knowing that 15% of the population will never get a vaccine, based on surveys he's seen, Watson is looking at getting 60% to 70% of the population vaccinated before we can ease up on the restrictions, what he says. With about 8.5% of Texans fully vaccinated, we're not close to herd immunity yet. Robinson says we've already seen cases numbers trending down here. most importantly in hospitalizations and even deaths because of vaccinations, as well as the number of people who have some immunity because of having had the virus. Take it away, narrator.
He says if the trends continue, herd immunity will be reached sometime later this year. At that point, Robinson says, he will be more confident about our ability to gather without everyone masking, but with some people still choosing to mask because of they are more vulnerable or more comfortable wearing a mask. More I and Austin, vaccine distribution sites highlight racial equity disparities.
Um, of course, everybody gets vaccinated, bro. Um, so yeah. Sorry about the I pressed the wrong button by mistake. So yeah. Anyway, anyway, vaccines given to people with the intellectual and developmental disabilities, caregivers in Austin. Tarrytown Pharmacies is making an effort to vaccinate 2,200 people with intellectual and developmental disabilities and their caregivers throughout Texas. So, out vaccinating the variants. Your next narrator.
Variants, though, could prevent herd immunity. As long as the virus is circulating, there is a pressure for it to infect more people and to mutate, says Darlene Abnani, an infectious disease epidemiologist at Bell Medical School at the University of Texas. We need to get more people fully vaccinated or at least to have one dose to prevent more mutations or the vaccine becoming less effective. We need to do this quickly, she says. March, April, and May will be key months. Current vaccines still provide immunity to the variants, though it is decreased. We haven't seen that strain yet that will break through the vaccine, says Dr. Brian Metzger, an infectious disease specialist at St. David's Medical Center. The vaccine formulas might need to be tweaked or changed to control for variants. We also might learn from vaccine study participants, who are only 3 to 6 months ahead of the rest of the population, that the amount of immunity we have from vaccines wanes.
Next.
Current vaccines still provide immunity to the variants, though it is decreased. We haven't seen that strain yet that will break through the vaccine, says Dr. Brian Metzger, an infectious disease specialist at St. David's Medical Center. The vaccine formulas might need to be tweaked or changed to control for variants. We also might learn from vaccine study participants, who are only 3 to 6 months ahead of the rest of the population, that the amount of immunity we have from vaccines wanes. Then we'll need a booster. It's quite possible that every year we get a coronavirus shot and a flu shot, Hatton says. Tweaks or a booster shot won't take as much time to develop, test, or get into arms. Metzger estimates 6 weeks instead of months. It's also possible that as people develop immunity either through infection or vaccination, this coronavirus becomes like the common cold, where we know it exists and it doesn't cause devastation, Watson says. Dr. Jordan Weingarten, who works in the intensive care unit at Seton Medical Center, says he believes that in a few years COVID-19 will be like a bad flu, with the occasional patient, rather than a whole ICU full of it. He says, I'd like to turn COVID into another respiratory illness. I think we'll get there, but that's not going to happen if we don't mask. And if we don't vaccinate, he says. Get vaccinated at the earliest opportunity, he says.
Okay. So the vaccines are coming. Hatton says he knows that people want restrictions to end now, and they want to get vaccinated now. They are frustrated that they can get an appointment right now. I know these people personally, he says. They are my family members, my friends. He tells them, hang in there. He helps organize the mass vaccine clinic at the Circuit of the Americas, and he has seen a change even in the last month. The amount of vaccines coming to us has
exponentially
grown. He says it starts 600 vaccines. Then 2,000. Then 4,000. Last weekend they had 1,000 vaccines. This weekend they have 1,400 vaccines, he says. We got to keep up, Hope Hatton says. Every time he runs a vaccine clinic, it's a party, it's a celebration, he says. We have people coming through that haven't left the house in a year. It was the first time they got in the car for a year. There are tears the whole time. Narrator, you're next.
The Johnson & Johnson vaccine is changing things on the ground because more vaccines are available and it's easier at the mass clinics to pull each dose, lessening the time it takes per person to vaccinate. Plus, it's one dose, which means there's no time spent trying to get people scheduled for their next dose. Hatton wants people to stop worrying about the difference in the efficacy rates between the three vaccines. Moderna and Pfizer both showed a 95% efficacy rate in preventing disease. Johnson & Johnson shows a 66% efficacy rate in preventing disease, but there is a big caveat with that. Moderna and Pfizer were tested from August through October, when the disease in the population was low and variants were not yet circulating here. Johnson & Johnson was tested in the late fall and winter when there was more disease and variants, Metzger says. With all three, the likelihood that you'll survive, that you'll get over it, it's 100%, Hatton says. Not dying is what really should matter. The fastest way to get back to normal is to get vaccinated with any shot offered, when it is offered to you. In Texas, beginning next week, anyone 50 and older can get vaccinated, as well as healthcare workers, teachers, pregnant women, and anyone 16 and older with pre-existing conditions or who are obese. As more and more people get the vaccine, more and more groups of people will be added to this list. The FDA has approved the Pfizer vaccine for ages 16 and older. Moderna and Johnson & Johnson are approved for 18 and older.
All right. We're going to read the last one until we're going to end.
Metzger expects that by May, the FDA will have approved at least one vaccine for ages 12 to 15, followed by children 5 to 11, possibly by late summer or fall. The studies for that group have not yet begun, but are expected soon.
Okay, we're going to stop right there. So yeah, that was your Sunday's live stream. So we're gonna end the stream right now because we're gonna have a big fun day today. So yeah, because all over coronavirus out there. So yeah, so remember, wash your hands or keep practicing social distancing or whatever. So yeah, I want to let you know, set your clocks set your clocks as tonight. So yeah, and let's not forget COVID-19 Remembrance of according to Mayor LeBlanc. So yeah. Anyway, so if you're subscribed for more content to Privacy J Productions and the Privacy J Productions 2, all of my social medias will let you know all about it. Facebook, my name is Jaden Garcia, And Instagram is jtech727, Snapchat is scoots0727, and follow me on Twitter at privacyjnyc1. So thanks for watching. And let's not forget, we're gonna have a day off for 2 weeks. So we'll be back the following Sundays. So let's not forget spring break and Easter. So yeah. So thanks for watching and peace out.